right? So we can take advantage of that. That's white privilege. That's the ability of the dominant group to know we can get away with stuff that other people can't get away with. That's how racism manifests in the present. It's not just overt bigotry. Those cops that arrest all those people, they may or may not be bigots, right? We know some are. We certainly have enough evidence to suggest there are truly overtly racist police officers out there. But you know what? Even if none of them were, if they're operating on the basis of prejudiced assumptions that are maybe internalized subconsciously, they might not even be consciously internalizing them, but they've seen the same media reports, they see the same, media representations of who the so-called bad guys are, and then if I'm a cop, I'm out there doing my job, and that's who I'm on the lookout for, because I've internalized the same prejudices that everybody else did. I might not be hateful, I might not be a bigot, I might actually think that I'm helping the community by going and making these arrests and clearing folks out that are breaking the law. I might actually think that I'm a good guy doing good stuff, not realizing that even if it's good to get some folks off the street that are involved in criminal activity, if you're only doing that over here and there are folks doing the same stuff over here, you're reinforcing racial inequality and racism, even if you aren't doing it on purpose. Even if the cops don't wake up in the morning thinking, oh, watch this, I'm going to go and lock up some black people because I hate them, or I'm going to go lock up some brown folks because I hate them. They don't even have to hate anybody. They just have to operate on the basis of these assumptions that our whole culture often has. Like, these stereotypes are so deeply ingrained, it doesn't require bigotry. That's the point, right? Racism in the modern era is very different. It is often this subconscious stuff that we've internalized, don't even realize that we've internalized it. So like a couple years ago, they did this study. These psychologists took these white folks, and these were white folks who were not overtly racist, right? They were not blatantly racist at all. They actually gave them a test at the beginning of the study to actually test for overt racism. I didn't even know there was such a test, but apparently there is. And they gave it to these white folks, and they all passed. These were all nice white liberal folks, right? All open-minded, not overtly racist. And so after they had proven they weren't overtly racist, they hooked these white folks up to brain scan imaging machines, right? These machines that can take these pictures of the brain scan of your brain and see like where the energy and the activity is in your brain in various moments. And so then they hook them up to these machines. They start flashing images on a computer screen in front of them, right? So they put a computer right in front of them, start flashing images. But the images are flashed so fast that you can't even really see what it was, right? These are called subliminal images. They're so quick that your conscious mind doesn't even know what it saw, right? But the subconscious does, and it reacts to it. They used to do this, by the way, like 50, 60 years ago in movie theaters. Like some of the older folks will remember this was a big scandal. You used to have these movie theater operators that would go in and take the movie and then take like, I don't know, 5 or 6 of the little frames of the movie, and they would insert the word like popcorn on there, right? As a subliminal way to make you buy popcorn, right? So you'd be sitting there in the theater watching the movie, this is a good movie, man. And then all of a sudden half the audience is getting up going to the concession stand. Not even thinking about, like, why are we all doing that? I don't know, but I need some popcorn. You need some popcorn? Yeah, I need some damn popcorn. Let's get some popcorn. And then you go get the popcorn, you come back, right? And so that was what they would do to sell products, and now it still works. It's just the way the brain operates. So they have these white folks on these brain machines and looking at the brain scan image, and they start flashing these pictures. And a lot of these pictures are sort of meaningless, like a bunny rabbit, blade of grass, a tree, whatever. Nothing that would really provoke a big emotional response. And when they showed those images, like there wasn't a lot of activity going on. It was pretty much just a flat response, right? But then they flashed the image of a black male face for only like 85 milliseconds. That's how fast it was, right? Flash a black male face, and all of a sudden that part of the brain that responds to fear and anxiety and stress, and that part of the brain that responds to try to shut down fear and anxiety and stress, right, lit up like a Christmas tree in about 90% of the participants, right? And they didn't even know what they'd seen, right? But they knew it scared them, right? And then as soon as that image was replaced with something else, that reaction went away, and it was replaced with nothingness again. It's the only image that got that reaction. Now, none of these people were overtly racist, but what that says is that they can look at, not even realize they saw a black male face, and have that react. And keep in mind, this is like a nice air-conditioned lab environment, and they're sitting in like a cushy seat. It's not a stressful environment. What they think, this black man on the screen is going to jump out the computer and strangle them? Like, what in the world are they actually afraid of? They don't even know they saw a black man, and they're still freaking out. Imagine then what would happen out on the street. If you're a law enforcement officer, even if you're not overtly racist and you see a person of color, or you're a wannabe self-appointed neighborhood watch captain, like George Zimmerman, and you see Trayvon Martin, and now this isn't even a cushy lab environment. Now this is the real world, and you've been conditioned to have this reaction. Or you're Michael Dunn, also in Florida, and you see Jordan Davis and his 3 friends pull up in an SUV blasting music that you don't like, and then you see a gun in their hands. You see, when Michael Dunn shot Jordan Davis, right, and shot into that SUV, I think he actually did see a gun. Not because a gun was there, you understand, but because he had been conditioned to think of young black men as carrying weapons. There was no gun. That was proven in the trial. There was no weapon ever found, and no evidence that they had one. But he saw it in his mind's eye because he had been conditioned. Now, I'm not suggesting that George Zimmerman or Michael Dunn are these open-minded, non-bigoted types. I'm not suggesting that. But what I'm saying is that even those who aren't bigoted and overtly hateful can be turned into Michael Dunn or George Zimmerman in the lab, you see. Luckily, they don't have a gun on them, and it's not the real world. But what that tells you is it's very risky out there. Or like, think about it if you're a teacher in a classroom, teaching 8th grade kids, right? It's that moment when kids start to get real big, right? Like 7th and 8th grade is when they start to grow, and there's a lot of research. That's when teachers start freaking out and getting scared of black and brown males in particular, right? That's when all of a sudden the white middle class and upper middle class teachers stop thinking the kids are cute. Right? When they're in 3rd and 4th grade, oh, they're real cute. Everybody like they're real cute. Then they get a little bit taller, a little bit bigger. Now they're afraid of them. So now if I'm a teacher, and I've internalized, I can be nice and liberal. You know, most teachers, I guess, for what it's worth, are relatively open-minded people. They're trying to be in a helping profession. You know, they're trying to do good things in the world. They're not out there selling stuff on Wall Street. You know, they're better than that, you know. So here they are, and all of a sudden, let's say there's a kid in class that's acting up a little bit. Nothing bad, nothing real serious, just doing what kids do. But if I've been conditioned to have a fear response to any kind of behavior on the part of a black child or a Latino child that maybe I wouldn't have if it was a white child, what am I going to do? I'm going to send that child to the office. I'm going to give them a referral, maybe suspend them, expel them. That's one of the reasons that black kids, Latino kids, and in certain communities, Southeast Asian kids and indigenous children, Native American folk, are suspended at double the rate, triple the rate, 3.5 times the rate of white children. Not because they're actually breaking the rules more often. The research says that actual rule breaking in classes is pretty much even across the board, right? But what we have is we got people of color being put out of the class and suspended from school for 3 days or 5 days or 10 days or expelled, mostly for subjective stuff, not like bringing a gun to school or getting in a fight. That's not subjective, that's objective. You bring a gun to school, you know you're getting thrown out. That's how it works. You bring weapons or drugs or get in a fight, you're probably going to get suspended. That's not what people are getting suspended for mostly. They're getting suspended for, like, disrespecting authority. What does that mean? See? Disrespecting authority is in the eyes of the authority as to what is disrespectful and what isn't. There's no objective scale for measuring disrespect. So if I talk back to a teacher or challenge a teacher on something, right, that might not be seen as disrespectful because it doesn't trigger a stereotype about that 8th grade white child, right? But if a black child or a Latino child or any child of color challenges the authority of that teacher, especially if that teacher's white, right, that may be seen as far more aggressive, as far more disrespectful. So that, again, is about subconscious bias. That's not the kind that you can see play out on the black and white footage on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. There was nothing subconscious about that. That was conscious, right? That was overt. And we passed laws, in theory, to deal with overt racism. So like I said, this is the 50-year anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. What you need to understand, though, is that Civil Rights Act was only meant to deal with pretty much obvious racism, like blatant discrimination on the job, or blatant discrimination at a lunch counter, or blatant discrimination in public accommodations like hotels and movie theaters and department stores, right? It doesn't do anything about that subconscious bias. The law doesn't even allow us to get at that, right? That stuff can happen, and there's nothing that existing anti-discrimination law does about that. And so that becomes a problem that the law really can't solve. So that's the first issue. The second, in the modern era, is that racism isn't just subconscious, it's also so systematized that it no longer requires intentional bad, evil actions on the part of overt racists in order to function. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Last year, about this time, there was an article in the New York Times, and it was referring to this study that had been done. And what the study found was that like half of all the jobs in the new economy, roughly half, like 47%, but basically half the jobs, were being filled in this country not because we all sent in resumes and they just hired the best person. That's the theory, right? People apply and then they just hire the best. But that's not what was happening. Half the jobs are being filled by way of letters of recommendation written by people who already work for the company. So in other words, the only way you got a shot at half the jobs is you got to know somebody who already works there. You got to know Jim over in the accounting division, or you got to know Mary over in the human resources division. Or else, if you don't know somebody who can write a letter for you, your odds of getting a job have just been cut in half. Now, you might think, well, what does that have to do with race? And I guess in theory, nothing. But in practice, everything. Because who are the folks who are more likely to be in the network to know the right people to write those letters? Well, the article and the study on which it was based made it very clear. Overwhelmingly, the people who benefit from those insider connections are going to be white, and they're going to be male, and they're going to be affluent, and they went to the quote-unquote right colleges where they made the quote-unquote right connections. What does that mean? It means that you could be the most qualified person for that job, but if you're a person of color, if you're a woman of any color, if you're a working class white dude, you could be a working class white guy that just didn't go to the right school or join the right fraternity or hang out with the right people, and then you're scratched from half the jobs. Like, you don't even have a shot. See, sometimes when we do this work, those of us who do this work, we talk about American society sort of like a relay race, right? We say there's an 8-lap relay race, and some folks had a 5-lap head start, right? And that's a pretty good metaphor in the sense that if you had a 5-lap head start, you're supposed to cross the finish line first. That's not shocking, right? So you should have a higher test score if you had an advantage. You should have a better resume if you had more opportunity. You're supposed to have had more seniority if you got into the pipeline first. But this right here is even worse than a 5-lap head start in an 8-lap race. If it's all about old boys networks, that basically is a totally different metaphor. You don't even know there's a race going on, right? And the people that are operating the race don't know about you. They don't know you're out there. If they did, maybe they'd give you a shot, but they don't even know, and you don't know they're there. So you can't even get into the race, you see? And so that ends up perpetuating racial inequality, gender inequality, class inequality, having nothing to do with ability, having nothing to do with qualifications, having nothing to do with merit. And that is why we have so much inequality still 50 years after the Civil Rights Act. So for instance, the Labor Department tells us that right now, black men and black women with college degrees are almost twice as likely as whites with degrees to be unemployed. So you can have a college degree, still almost twice as likely as whites with degrees to be out of work. Latino folk with a degree, 50% more likely than whites with a degree to be out of work. Indigenous Native North American peoples with a degree, 60% more likely than whites with a degree to be out of work. Asian American and Pacific Islander folk with a degree, 30% more likely than whites with a degree to be unemployed. So you can have the same background, you can have the same credentials, you can have the same education, and still not have the same opportunity. Now, is that because of overt racism? I'm going to say no for the most part. Not that there isn't some, but I'm going to just for the sake of argument say no, I don't think that's mostly overt racism. I think it's that networking thing, right? Because if you don't have the right connections, you can have that degree, you're still not going to have the same odds of getting a good job, right? Or being able to keep that job. You're still going to be the first one laid off when the economy goes south, right? And so in a sense, even if there aren't any overt racists in America left, and we know that's not true, but even if there weren't any, if that old boys network is responsible for half the jobs being filled, then it might as well be the case that half of the employers are bigots because the outcome is the same. So even if they're not bigots, there's no difference in the way. It doesn't matter. If you didn't get an opportunity, you don't really care whether it was because the dude was in the Klan or just didn't know about you. Does it really matter? Either way, you didn't get the gig, right? The fact that they didn't even know about you doesn't make it feel any better that you're not being able to find a job in spite of your qualifications. So the bigotry isn't the issue. The outcomes are the issue. Right now, white men between 25 and 29, that's pretty young, early on in their careers. White men between 25 and 29 earn on average 1/3 more each year than black men who are between 50 and 54. I want you to think about that. These black men who have been in the workforce for a quarter century longer than these white men. Been in the workforce, having 25 years of extra experience, still making less than these younger white dudes. Is that because of overt racism? Probably not most of the time, but it's that networking thing. If I'm 27 and white, but I went to the right school and I know the right people, I've got a better shot of getting a higher paid job than somebody who's been at it for 25 extra years. So even without overt bigotry, that's what we're looking at. And once again, you know what the Civil Rights Act does about that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. In fact, the courts have said that networks and things like that that provide unequal opportunity are perfectly legal. You can't do anything about it, which means we can't use the law as the only solution here. We've got to think broader about how we deal with opening up those networks because the law itself won't do that right now. See? There's something else, though, about racism in the modern era. It's about